So, welcome back to the Freedom Formula, where today I have a very special guest, Melo, actually coming over from Australia. And it's funny. So, Michelle helps me book all these things, and she makes sure that I know who I'm getting to talk to and just learn a little bit about them. And I went to Instagram and I was just poking around, just trying to understand a little bit about you and learn and just see, hey, what's going on. And I saw your book, and the idea is kind of beating burnout. And it is such a prevalent topic that I think a lot of people talk about, but it's more in the vein of like, hey, don't be burnt out and rise and grind in seasons. But they don't actually talk about it in such just a kind of open way where it is a part of entrepreneurship, business ownership, and things like that. So honestly, that's the biggest thing that I'm excited for. As we were just kind of warming up before the show, you mentioned a lot of what that book is about is through experience and not just going to business school and learning some tactics and everything there, and riding a mountain bike all over the world is I actually have a lot of questions about that too because I'm just intrigued. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. If you're listening in, watching in, you run a business, you lead a team, this one's going to be a good one because undoubtedly at some point in time this year and your career, you're facing burnout. We need to understand it. We need to look out for it. We need to know how to handle it. And sometimes it's just going to be part of it. But either way, Mello, appreciate you hopping on. Would love to start off with just like who you are, some experience, and like why do I get the pleasure of hanging out and chatting with you today, man?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for welcoming onto the show. Mellow by name, mellow by nature is often what people sort of say about me. Mellow, the mindfulness teacher, so I do a lot of mindfulness and meditation teaching. But typically, I'm on a mission just to help as many people as possible to beat burnout and find balance in their life, or stay energized as a high performer without compromising their well-being. And the way I do that is through some of my keynote talks. I do a lot of corporate facilitation. So I go into companies and I give them programs and workshops where they can actually learn about resilience and how to prevent burnout even happening in the first place. And then I also do some one-on-one coaching. And I love the variety of clients that I have. It's anybody from someone suffering mental health problems to high performing Olympic athletes to CEOs, executives, doctors, surgeons, you name it. And I love that variety because I learn just as much from them as I share with them. So yeah, that's my mission, and part of the book that I produced, Beating Burnout, Finding Balance, was all about helping more people around the world, because many people know me inside those four walls of those companies, but I wanted to spread the mission further and wider.
Yeah, I love that. I think the message is needed, and I'm looking forward to diving in. But I think out of the gates, kind of, I'd like some thoughts. And on Instagram, on social media in general, there's a lot of popularity behind the idea that hey, work harder, grind. When you're young, you just have time, and like who knows what young is even more. I'm not sure. Like there's just so much of the idea that like hey, grind your face off until you feel like you might need a break, then grind harder, and then eventually maybe take a break. And people like Alex Hermosi and whatnot. And listen, Alex has built a massive business. I've had the pleasure of being able to be coached by Alex for a period of time. So nothing against him. I just don't know that what he's saying and what other people are saying is necessarily the best message out there for everybody. And some people it might be perfect for. I don't know, but I'd love to just jump in. And what are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I understand that sort of grind culture. It's like we feel that we have to, work relentless hours, get up at the 5 a.m. club and, do all those sort of things, which is great for some people. It really is. And that helps them to stay motivated. But it's not sustainable for the long term. And I see it in many that, for example, the doctors that I work with, doctors are, their own worst enemies. They build these huge businesses and practices, and surgeons, and they, for the first 10 years of their life, they're studying, and then they get a practice, and they got this practice that's very successful, but they end up working 80, 90-hour weeks, which they can sustain for a period of time in their 30s and 40s. But then I see them starting to get tired in their 50s and 60s, and they just cannot maintain it. So my strategy is like let's put some lines in the sand and let's put some boundaries around so we actually don't get to that point one good example of this that you mentioned, people working to the grind, is one of my clients who was running multiple businesses around the world. So he was doing multiple time zones. He was doing the UK, US, and Australian time zones. And he wore it as a badge on how busy he was. I was so busy. I worked in the LAX airport, and then I got to the Qantas lounge, and I worked in the Qantas lounge. And I got to my office in LA, and I worked there, sometimes not sleeping at all, like not even going to bed because it was crossing time zones. And he wore it as a badge. And then eventually his body said, I can't do this anymore. It just stopped. It actually shut down. So his body stopped producing testosterone. His endocrine system was shot. His nervous system was shot. His pancreas, spleen, liver started shutting down. And he was actually hospitalized in intensive care for weeks and then in hospital for months before he recovered. So at what point do you start listening to the signs? At what point do you start listening to your body? Because he saw the signs, but he just ignored them.
Yeah.
And I see this quite often, with high performers, and entrepreneurs are sometimes, guilty of this too, where they love their job so much and I do too. I love my job. I love what I do, but it's not sustainable just to be thinking about it all the time, working on it all the time. Yes, we get excited about new ideas, but we also have to put boundaries to find that balance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I will say, I do think there are seasons and there are times where
Mm.
you're going to grind and you're going to be a little bit tired and things for sure. And then there's times where, hey, we're going to ease up and we're going to refuel and rest. And, for me, winter time, work harder, stay inside, do the things so I can enjoy and work a little less hard in the summer and whatnot. But one of my rules that I learned early in my career, because I opened my first business and I don't think I took a vacation for about 2 years. And I remember the feeling of hating my business leading up to that vacation. And I just hated
Mm.
being locked there and all this stuff and having to show up. And I didn't understand at the time, as the first time as a business owner. I came back from vacation. I was like, oh, I really don't want to go back to work and go back to that. So I had to work through it a lot and I had to learn. And now for me, I always know when my next vacation is. I always know when my next thing is going to be. So I have something to look forward to. And yeah, for 5 weeks, it might be a sprint. For 5 months, it might be a sprint. But how do I handle that sprint really had to come out of that. And, I think I'd ask you, like, what's a big tip that you really start off with or lead with people? And I've heard some of the ideas like the 137 rule, which I think is a great idea, but where do you go with people?
Yeah, and I agree with you in the point of we have seasons, we have busy periods, and we have times that are you just got to be switched on and you got to do that job. You've got a big project going, which is great and exciting, but always give yourself a reward on the other end because sometimes you finish that and you're on to the next one and there's no break in between. And many people that I work with, I hear it all the time. They finally get their end of year vacation holiday and then they fall sick for the first week because they're exhausted, their nervous system is shot, and they have to recover from a sickness because their body's finally stopped. So my advice is let's not wait till the end of the year for the holiday. Yes, fantastic, always put in those milestones. I do the same, put in little mini vacations, mini holidays, mini retreats throughout the year, so you've got something to look forward to. But my big advice is actually to find balance in your day, to find balance in your week, to find balance in your month, because most people are just on all day long. For example, you're working all day, you're thinking, you're planning, you're problem solving, you're decision making. So we're switched on. We're in this high stimulated state, and most people's baseline is already high stimulus. So it takes a long time for them to come down and relax and actually unwind. Some of them, have sleeping problems, for example, because they're so switched on. So my big takeaway that I share with people, and one of the big lessons and techniques is let's find balance in our day between what's called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic is when we're switched on, we're thinking, fight and flight response. We're in a bit of a stress response there, which is, somewhat healthy to do that. We need some stress to drive us and motivate us, but also balance that out with periods of rest and renewal. And that could be in the form of, meditation. It can be in the form of just having a little break in the day. It could be in the form of just having punctuations of renewal breaks. Athletes know it very well. If there's any elite athletes out there, they know they need to do their job and do their sport, but they also know the benefit of renewal. And most people in the work that I do are just so driven and love what they do so much, they don't give themselves permission to stop in the day. They don't give themselves permission to pause because they think if they're not doing, they're not performing.
Yeah.
But sometimes the very thing we need to do to be more productive and to improve our performance is to stop for 2 minutes or stop for 5 minutes. So I teach what's called a 90-second breath break, literally 90 seconds. 90 seconds to stop in your day when you're a bit scattered, you've got too much going on, pause, follow your breath for 90 seconds, like doing a breathing technique. And that's a great way to reset the brain, reset the mind, so you can actually be more focused for the next few weeks, a few hours there. And also on that note, if you find balance in your day, you won't be exhausted at the end of the night. You still have energy. If you find balance in your day on a weekly basis, you won't be wiped out at the end of the week. And it takes you the whole weekend to recover. So when it comes to balance, it's like, let's find balance in our day. Let's find balance in our week. Let's find balance in our month with little renewal breaks, and then extend that out for the whole year.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, and everybody's different. My
Yeah.
morning routine is the thing I hold very near and dear to my heart. And before this thing starts going off and like people need me and I have to respond to questions, it's get up and go to the gym, get my workout time in, come home, get my sauna time in, shower, eat, and all the things. And 8:15, 8:30, okay, time to work and think. But even when I have my rest days where it's planned, where I'm not going to go work out, because you also need to rest
Right.
your body, your muscles, it's like I feel myself a little, oh, let me look at the phone earlier, let me do this earlier, and I end up being so much more tired on those days. And I know why. It's just your brain starts getting used earlier. But what is your routine? And I guess health being one of our cornerstones that we like to talk about here, like what does that look like for you on a maybe daily, weekly, monthly basis? Working out, meditation, nutrition, what do you do?
Yeah. My non negotiable, no matter where I am on the planet, no matter what I have to do, is my morning routine is pretty set, where I get up quite early, get that serotonin production, get on outside and get some sunlight. Typically just take my dog for a walk, bit of a brisk walk with some exercise and some stretching. That's usually about 20 to 40 minutes. Then directly after that, I'll do a meditation practice, which is also about 20 minutes. So then I find stillness in my day, set my intentions for the day ahead, and then I have a healthy breakfast. And all of that's done without the telephone. Of course, I haven't even looked at my telephone yet, haven't even looked at my mobile phone. So that's my non negotiable. And a lot of people have good morning routines. It's probably something similar. They go to the gym or whatever it is. But the other thing that I do, which I think is as important, and a lot of people don't do this, is actually close the day. Closing the day routine. A lot of people, they finish their day, but they're still on, they're still thinking, they're still accessible on their laptops or their mobile phones. So also at the end of the day, I do something similar, and it's usually a shorter version of that. I'll close the day. I'll close all the tabs in my head, physically close the tabs on my computer, close the tabs on my head and say, okay, I'm signing off now, do a short meditation practice, then again, go for a walk. I try to go for a walk around sunset. So I get that sort of serotonin, melatonin, benefit. So my body says, okay, I'm winding down now, and start creating some wind down rituals. So they're my two that I always do. And also, like I said before, punctuating my day with little periods of rest. So if I've got a big day ahead, like I have today, I've got a series of seminars, workshops that I'm running, plus some coaching. I make sure that in between those, it's not just back to back go. I make sure in between those that I just do those 90-second resets to stop, pause, sometimes just get off my seat and go pat the dog for 5 minutes and do something just to have that renewal through the day. So they're my three non-negotiables: morning, afternoon close, and then through the day, those snack meditations, I call them.
Yeah, I love that. I maybe about a year ago, I set my phone where at 7:30 p.m. it automatically goes to sleep mode for me, shuts off all my notifications and turns everything to black and white and gray, and it's no longer appealing to look at. There's the benefits of no colors in your phone and brightness for sure, but what I find is like, oh, I don't want to look at this anymore because it doesn't have that attention grabbing thing. And it's also my, all
Mm.
right, cool, I'm not paying attention to time, but it's that time to just put the phone down and be done. And that has helped me fall asleep so much more quickly, which is nice.
Great. Yeah, a lot of people don't wind down. They're still switched on, even sometimes checking their telephone in bed while they're in bed,
Yeah,
scrolling at the end of the day. So I always advise to create some wind down rituals through the day. So in terms of sleep, obviously we know that sleep is our number one thing that we need for everything in terms of performance. But a lot of people can't sleep well because they're so overstimulated.
yeah,
So your daytime habits govern your nighttime sleep, first of all. So if you're taking these renewal breaks through the day, if you're doing these small meditations through the day, when you go to bed at night, you don't have to do this massive upload, because when you sleep, obviously you're processing information, but also when you meditate through the day and do these small meditations, you're also processing information.
yeah,
So that's one reason why those meditations through the day are really important, even if they're like just small breath breaks, like I said. But also when you finish work, that wind down, and then like you said, turning your devices off at a certain time, another wind down ritual, and then maybe a meditation or a cup of hot tea or a hot bath or a shower, whatever it is that signals, hey, I'm winding down now. It's time for me to wind down. So then chances are you have a better sleep, and then obviously you perform better, you exercise more, you eat better, all those great things. So sleep is a non-negotiable.
for sure. So, also in the health realm, you mentioned, pre-show here that you've ridden a mountain bike all over the world, and you're not going to do that if you're not in shape and athletic and capable of doing that. So, talk to me, I guess, a little bit about the in shape health side of the riding the bike, but I'm also like, where have you ridden? Like, what things have you done? Because I think that's cool. And quick backstory is I do a backpacking trip every year, which is an absolute forced reset where I don't even have service should I want to try to connect to something. And it's just me, two or three friends in wilderness, relying on ourselves to, survive and thrive through whatever hard thing we're doing. And I always come back from those trips just that connection. The nature is fantastic. That disconnection from the world is amazing. There's so many good things about it. So I like the idea of all that stuff. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so some years ago, five of my friends had this crazy idea to cycle around the world on our mountain bikes, and we were fit and strong and healthy at the time, and doing training rides, doing big 200-kilometer rides and things to get strong and fit and healthy. But unfortunately, one by one, as we started getting the maps out of Africa and India and Asia, all five of my friends bailed on me. So they actually said, no, I'm not doing it. It's too dangerous. So I was caught in the situation where, do I also bail and not do it, or do I actually go? So I decided to go and actually do it myself, do a solo trip around the world. So I circumnavigated the planet on my mountain bike. And it wasn't always riding. Sometimes it was trekking. Sometimes it was jumping on the back of a truck if I needed to, or elephant or a cow or whatever was moving across those countries. But typically I cycled about 30 odd thousand kilometers across 5 continents. And the stories that came out of there and the experiences that came out of there. And typically one of my goals was just to immerse myself in more the spiritual practices. At the time, I was doing a lot of meditation, a lot of introspection, practicing Shaolin Kung Fu and some of the internal martial arts. And I wanted to explore that around the world. So wherever I was, I'd stay in monasteries and temples and learn about their religious and spiritual practices. But I also, most of the time, stayed in with indigenous cultures. So staying with, for example, crossing the southwest of America, staying with the Hopi and Navajo Indians, or traveling through Africa, I'd stay with the Dogon people or the Maasai people, and just learn about their ways. So amazing experiences, and obviously getting quite sick along the way, staying with those people and eating their food and drinking their homemade alcohol or whatever it was, or the yak butter tea. But yeah, I learned a lot about myself on that trip. I learned a lot about resilience and dealing with adversity. I got quite sick, like I said, caught malaria in Africa, which nearly killed me, and had to deal with it in the moment. Had machine guns in my ribs, had knives to my throats, had near-death experiences, but that shapes who I am. And I'm so glad I did that trip solo, because it was for me, and I learned a lot about myself, but also learned a lot about what pushes my buttons, my boundaries, my limits, my strengths, my weaknesses. And that's what I teach now. All those lessons that I learned on the road, I teach that in the workshops that I do. So it's not, like we said before, just academic learning. I cut my teeth on the road and learnt those lessons. And Amazing experience. And not only the bad experiences, I will say, a lot of people ask, oh, what was the worst thing that happened, or what was the most dangerous thing that happened? But also I was touched by the kindness of strangers. I was touched by, the amount of times people let me into their homes. I'd ride into a village, let's say in Africa, and I have an entourage of little kids following me, and they'd be laughing and cheering, and then we'd be playing some games together. And then before I know it, I was invited into a home, and I'd never had to set my tent up because they invite me in and they'd be giving me food. And so the hospitality and the kindness of strangers was absolutely beautiful.
That's amazing. I could only I feel like I could only dream about that one. I like my bike. I don't love my bike that much. Um I might stick to my backpacking trips and kind of experiencing nature that way, but that's incredible. That's incredible. So,
Yeah, the great thing about a bike and traveling on a bike is you're part of the
yeah.
environment. Like you're like backpacking also, you're in the elements, you can smell everything, you can feel everything. And when you're coming into a village or a town, you're non-threatening. You're not like a tourist on a bus taking photos out the window.
Yeah.
You're part of the environment, you're part of the people. And I was in no hurry to leave. When I got invited into a village, I'd get to know the people, get to know the chief and the people of the place there. And that was just a beautiful exchange of cultures. And if I could share something of my knowledge, I'd share that, and they'd share back with me. And it was more like a traveling adventure of the cultures than a tourist expedition.
That's amazing. I love that. So, okay. Well, moving on from the health side of things and the biking and whatnot, when we think about, again, our pillars here, wealth and relationships are the other two big things. So, from a wealth perspective, I always enjoy the question, and selfishly, probably for me a little bit here, but I try to find a new financial, money, wealth thing that I can focus on and learn. And the more that I do that, and it's like, usually it's a year plus process to truly understand a thing. It's not a wake up overnight and like, oh, I know this new concept. Um, but as I do that, I realize there's just so many more questions that come up. I get smarter, but I also realize how dumb I really am when it comes to those things. So when on the wealth side of the world, like what are you passionate about? What things do you learn? Like what's something that as a business owner and as somebody who does what you do is focused on it helped you financially?
Yeah, I think it's about being really passionate about the impact and influence you make. So very often, the bigger the influence and impact that you make, the more money comes in from that. So I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of public speaking, for example. 2 years ago, I published the book Beating Burnout, Finding Balance, and the book itself doesn't make you a lot of money per se because it's actually you make a few dollars off each sale, but it's actually the impact and influence it's having around the world. So the book is selling really well around the world, including America, where it's actually doing really well as the audio book. So the book itself was a exposure and expansion idea, and from the book, it's given me permission to have bigger conversations. So people have found me around the world and say, "Hey, Melo, can you come and do a speaking gig for us in this place here? Can you do that?" Which then the money comes from that.
Yep.
So I think for me, the focus is more like, how can I improve my impact? How can I improve my influence? And how can I reach more people? Last year, for example, I did a TEDx talk, which talks all about one of the stories actually where I did have a machine gun in my ribs, by the way. So if anybody wants to listen to that, we can maybe put it in the show notes or something. So last year I did the TEDx talk, which again expanded my reach again. So for me, it's about with natural expansion and impact and influence, the money then comes from that. And then, being smart with your money, of course, investing it, reinvesting it, charging what you believe you are worth, I think is also a big one, because for far too long as a coach, I mean, I just love to help people. I just love helping people no matter who they are. And if they don't have the money, I'll still do it. And if they don't have the budget, I'll still do it. So I've learned that I have to really, value my worth and stick to my guns sometimes. And I'll help them in other ways, but maybe it's not through, one-on-one coaching. Maybe it's another method. I might give them a book, for example, which they can afford, or an online program. So it's about really, believing in your value and then charge accordingly from that, rising your fees. So this year, one of my big focuses is actually more global expansion. So reaching more people, including America, Dubai, Singapore. I want to do more public speaking in those countries. So my focus is on that to create more, impact. So I think with that, just it naturally expands. For me, it's an evolution of my work. If I think about my work 10 years ago, I was working in psychiatric clinics, mental health clinics, and it was tough. It was a tough gig where you're, supporting people, getting paid okay, but nothing, amazing. And then I've just followed my heart and my passion to help as many people as possible, like I said before. So now, instead of only working in psychiatric clinics, I also work in the corporate space, which obviously, is more financially viable. And then also, doing one-on-one coaching and also doing the public speaking. So having those multiple streams of income from the impact that I'm making.
Yeah, I love that. And it's you diversified the same skill, but through very different avenues where a lot of people are so set on, I need landing pages and sell the thing. I need social media to create conversations, or I need to be in my store to be able to sell the thing. And you've taken something and you're now out there and generating income from multiple things that still come from the exact same skill. And
That's
how do you
right,
multiply
exactly.
it?
That's right, and what I love is people call me. People will write me a message from the other side of the world and say, first of all, how they benefited from the book and they've got some great tips from it, or can you come and do a talk to our company? And so I work with some of the largest companies on the planet, many of the Fortune 500 companies, and I feel blessed to do that, and I feel blessed to share my message. And so it is about just share being passionate, being genuine, being authentic, and just sharing it with whoever can benefit from my skills.
Yeah, I love that. So talking about burnout specifically as we jump in, give me a little bit of an overview of the book. Like, what are some of the high level kind of highlights in there? And then we'll pick one to dive a little bit deeper into.
Sure. Yeah, so the idea of the book was actually to simplify the complex, because burnout, can be complex and it's multifactorial. There's many reasons. And my job in the book was to make it as simple as possible so people can actually walk away with some implementable tips to do. I mentioned before I work in psychiatric clinics, and I remember one of the head psychiatrists gave me her book on mental health and burnout and depression and things. And it was like 54 chapters long. It was like, oh my God, I couldn't get through it. And I'm into that. So imagine somebody that's burning out. There's no way in
Yeah.
the world that they could read that many pages. So I made it as simple as possible. Nine simple chapters, really easy to understand. And each chapter actually starts with one of my stories. So say, for example, the first chapter is about self-awareness, and that piece around self-awareness, because we can't change what we don't notice. We have to have that self-awareness first. And I'll share a story from my travels. Actually, the self-awareness story is about when I got caught in a storm, and I got hit by a tree in a big storm and knocked me off my mountain bike. Cut a long story short, I had to actually go inside to find that strength inside of me. And I actually meditated for 12 hours. So I actually was in a situation where the storm was just crazy around me, and I meditated from dusk till dawn to survive that. So that self-awareness piece, to believe I had the strength inside of me, those resources inside of me. So that's the story. And then from that, I'll share a teaching or a lesson, and then other people's. I interviewed many CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, thought leaders also for the book. So I get their take on that particular topic, on self-awareness or resilience or whatever it was. And then at the end of the chapter, there'll be a very simple takeaway technique that they can implement, the reader can use and implement straight away. So my goal was to simplify the complex. The chapters are around self-awareness, self-regulation, resilience, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with anxiety, dealing with overwhelm, preventing burnout to happen in the first place, and also staying focused on what matters. So the chapters are very pointed and have a important lesson. And I love it when I get emails from around the planet and they say, oh, that little tip on chapter 5, it's so handy. I've used that and it's really helped me. So, and also the other thing I'll say around the book was I interviewed about 200 thought leaders, like I said, entrepreneurs, executives. And it actually shocked me that 90% of the people that I interviewed did not realize they were burning out until it was too late. So it really made me realize that burnout is cumulative over time, and many people either don't read the signs or they see the signs and ignore them. or they don't have the techniques or tools to get out of it, and they just keep pushing on. I'll just keep going. I'll keep going. And hopefully, it goes away. But burnout is not exempt. Burnout and poor mental health is not exempt to anybody. And I see many high performers, suddenly burning out, or it's not. It feels like it's sudden, but it's cumulative over time, and then it might manifest as a sudden panic attack or some sort of physiological response where they have to actually stop and pause. So my goal is to catch burnout in the early stages as much as possible, so we can prevent it progressing into the fully fledged burnout.
Yeah, it's taken me years to start to feel and understand that, hey, I'm entering that early stage of burnout phase where I'm going to get tired, dislike, insert whatever negative connotation you want. My first 5-7 years of business was all of a sudden shows up and super tired, don't want to get out of bed for the weekend, get sick, some version thereof. And I used to go down that road. Oh, it's the holiday of a 3-day weekend. That solves the problem. And like that doesn't. It doesn't even touch
No.
the actual issues that you tend to be facing, which it does take a while to really understand. And as much as you love what you're doing, it's still very likely, not even just possible, but likely that you're gonna have to deal with burnout and figure that out. I've also learned that through my career.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not exempt, like I said, to anybody. And most people think they can just keep going and keep pushing on. We're not designed to be on all the time. We're not designed, and especially the stress response. The stress response where the amygdala fires up and it puts those stress chemicals through the body, and you're on for that period of time to get through that particular thing. That's great. We need it, and it's part of our survival as a species. But that's not designed to be switched on all the time and left on all the time without consequences. Like I mentioned before, that client of mine that his body just shut down. So we need to have mechanisms to switch on when we need to, but also mechanisms to switch off, and find that balance through the day. Because burnout, like you said before, it's not just stress. Burnout is the end result. And it doesn't matter how much sleep you get. It doesn't matter how much rest you get. It doesn't matter how much, recovery or go away for the weekend. You don't come back refreshed because your body's just is on the end result there of burnout. So just to define burnout, there's three main criteria. Number one is that absolute sheer exhaustion, like absolute exhausted, fatigued, different to being tired and you have a good night's sleep, you feel better. So that's number one. Number two is that sort of feeling a bit distant and feeling a bit detached from your work, drifting off a little bit, not present, not focused, and also maybe a bit more negative and cynical. So complaining and moaning a bit more than usual. And number three is that lack of professional efficacy. So being efficient in your work. So something that would normally be easy for you, an easy task, is like, oh my God, it's just so hard. It's just difficult. So that's the three criteria to diagnose what burnout is. And many people enter those places and they ignore the signs. Don't worry, I'll just keep going. I'll just keep pushing on. I'll just keep
More
pushing. It's a bit like
caffeine.
driving the car. I always say it's like driving the car and the oil light pops up. And it's like, oh, you need oil. No, forget it. That's okay. I'll just keep going. And then the gas light pops up, and then I'll just keep going. And then, of course, the car's going to break down and burn out, or whatever it is. So we have to look at the signs and read the signs and do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more caffeine is not the answer at that time. It's actually making it worse. I went through a stint in 2022 or was actually leading the due diligence process of a business to be bought out. And I knew it was going to be one of those times where you just got to grind to do the thing, no matter how tired you are.
Yeah.
For context, a normal 8-ounce cup of coffee is 90-ish milligrams worth of caffeine, depending upon your roast and brew and whatever. I was having around 14 to 15 times that in a day, or well over 1 gram of caffeine. Didn't even realize I was, but it was the only way to keep pushing and going and doing. And I remember the moment the deal was like, all right, cool, I'm done. And it was just this big fall off of a cliff, and talk about exhaustion and tired. And I couldn't even show up to work the next week to like do my normal job anymore because I was just so drained. Um,
Yeah.
Needless to say, I don't drink caffeine anywhere near like I used, nor like I was at that point in time, because it just wrecks you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's okay for a little period where, like you said, you've got a big project going on just to get through that bit. But the long term effects, people want to just keep pushing on through. Like I said before, most people don't give themselves permission to stop. So instead of stopping, so research does say that we can really optimize our performance and work in peak performance mode for periods of around 90 minutes to 2 hours. Yeah, so if you're switched on, you're planning, problem solving, decision making, analytical thinking, whatever it is you're doing, you can only do that really well for around about 2 hours max. That's when people say, I'll just keep going, but I need a coffee, and I'll just keep pushing on and try to have that stimulant to keep
Yeah.
pushing through to make it 5 hours or 6 hours. But chances are the quality of that work is compromised. Chances are you're batting your head. And that's why I say give yourself permission to stop for 5 minutes, and then you can actually have the same effect of almost like having a coffee because you just had a mental break. And what happens in that, the science of that is the amygdala down regulates, the stress center of the brain down regulates, and the prefrontal cortex, which is all about decision making, executive thinking, analytical thinking, that switches back on again. But most people, exactly like you said, I'll just have a coffee, I'll just finish that last little thing, I just got to get that last little bit out, and coffee's going to help me through that. So there's a yeah, it's a fake economy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So as people are listening to this and whatnot, like what would you say is the single most important thing for people to think about when it comes to battling this idea of burnout, not getting there? Is it the daily routine, making sure that that is intact? Is it understanding, hey, here's my goal line and I got to get through it? Like what is that one thing? And I'm sure it's also a little bit different for everybody in their position and their season to an extent as well. But I'm talking to you.
Mm.
Hey, Mello, like what is the one thing I need to make sure I keep top of mind to prolong this, avoid it as long as possible, or make sure it just doesn't happen?
Yeah, yeah. Preventatively, to prevent it happening in the first place, is maintain those self care habits, like really make them non negotiable, like I said. And that's those basic fundamentals we all know, like it's sleep, it's exercise, it's nutrition, it's mental breaks, the renewal breaks, they said, maybe it's mindfulness and meditation. But very often, what happens when we get stressed, when we get busy, when we get under the pump and we've got a big project going on, that's what we let go of. Oh, I won't go to the gym today, I'm too busy. Or I'll just grab takeaway on the way home because I'm too tired to cook. So maintaining those self-care habits, and if anything, to be honest, upping those self-care habits in the busy periods. So when you are busy, and instead of compromising those things, say, no, I'm going to make sure that I still go to the gym. I'm going to make sure that I still go for my walk. So maintaining those self-care habits to stop it even happening in the first place. That's one thing that I see a lot of. What I do with a lot of my clients is reclaim those, because many people have lost those self-care habits. So it's like, let's reclaim them and get them going. The other thing I'll say in terms of staying motivated, in terms of staying focused, and sometimes burnout is also from just lack of purpose and drive and motivation, is to realign with your why. Why you're doing that job in the first place. Because sometimes we get so caught up in the what we're doing and the busyness of the thing that we're doing, we forgot what we started for in the beginning. Like I mentioned before, I coach many doctors and surgeons, and they get so busy in the rat race of their life and the treadmill of their life that they forgot what they wanted to do this in the first place, is to help people and to heal people. So realign with what's called intrinsic motivators, those motivators that are inside of you to keep you going. Because sometimes when things get tough, it's like, oh, that's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm doing it. I know I'm doing it because I want to help people.
Yeah.
So realigning with the why. And the other thing, so the third thing I say is also having some little tools in your pocket, little self-regulation tools. So like I said before, the first step is self-awareness, like actually being aware, hey, I need to do something. I'm feeling a bit tired now, feeling a bit fatigued, or feeling a bit stressed, or feeling a bit unfocused or mental fog. What do I need to do to get back to that green zone, to get back to that functioning zone? So having some tools, whether it's breathing techniques, whether it's some hobbies and interests that you do that take your mind elsewhere, having some little self-regulation tools in your pocket that you can pull out. Hey, I need this one right now. I'm going to use this so I can prevent burnout happening in the first place.
Love those a lot. Well, this was amazing. Can't thank you enough for the time. If somebody's listening and they're interested in finding more about you, understanding speaking engagements, looking up to just make contact for any reason whatsoever, where is the best place or places to go?
My website's probably the first point of call, which is my name, Melo Calarco, MELOCALARCO.com. And I'm sure you might put that in the show notes there. It's pretty simple, melocalarco.com. Out of all these social profiles, yes, I'm on them. I'm on the Facebook and Instagram and all that. But the one I'm probably most active on is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, I'm often sharing tips and tricks and techniques on there. And maybe watch my TED Talk. The TED Talk is named Three Mindful Breaths under my name. So if you search that, Three Mindful Breaths, great way to sort of see my work and my message. And yeah, happy to support and help wherever I can. Feel free to reach out.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna go take a look at that TED Talk. I'd be curious, and just you'll be my next gym listen while I'm hanging out and doing some work. So I appreciate the time. Thank you
Awesome.
so much. Everything super valuable. If you're listening in, watching this, take that one thing that was like, oh, okay, and just start implementing. It's going to help. If you think you're never gonna burn out, you're wrong. Just find a way to really start diving in and leveraging some of these things. Go follow Melo, go learn more, understand it, get the book, read about it. And if you're leading a business and you're leading a team, definitely reach out to have a conversation to see if you can help with the team. So again, Melo, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.